The following program is a presentation of the Interfaith Broadcasting Commission.
"9 a.m., April 8th, 1916. A fire breaks out at St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church, where the congregation has just been dismissed from morning mass. 75-year-old priest Monsignor Nelson Baker is inside, kneeling at the altar steps, deep in prayer. Michael O'Mara, looking out of a post office window, sees smoke issuing from the church's belfry and calls the Victory Hose Fire Company. Parishioners rush into the church and carry out the chalice and other articles of value, fearing that they would be lost in the fire. The Victory Fire Captain arrives and finds Monsignor Baker still inside the church and warns him out. The Lackawanna and Buffalo fire departments also arrive to assist at the scene. A huge crowd gathers and witnesses the steeple swaying. The crowd shouts to the firemen working beneath it, and they rush to safety as the smoking steeple crashes to the ground. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt. The fire report stated faulty wiring in the steeple caused the blaze. For many years, thousands claimed to have had miraculous experiences in that little brick church. Monsignor Baker declared it was due to God's gifts, given through the intercession of Blessed Mary, Mother of Jesus. Today, on the very spot where St. Patrick's Church once stood, rises a testimonial of one man's unshakable faith and devotion to his inspiration. Our Lady of Victory.
O victorious Lady, Mother of the Sun.
I think it's an amazing story about how when saintly people also have time for architecture, because saintly people, you could say, are doing more important things than building buildings. And yet, somebody like Father Baker also thought it was worth spending time and money on building a beautiful church to God and Our Lady of Victory.
Father Baker's devotion to Our Lady of Victory goes back to 1874. He was not yet a priest, he was a seminarian. In fact, he was laid up for almost 9 months in the seminary infirmary with a disease that they think actually was connected with his service in the Civil War. It was very possible that he might not have been able to make it to ordination because of his health. And so he was very concerned about that. When he went on a pilgrimage to Rome with an American group, they stopped in Paris. The Archbishop of Paris took the group to Our Lady of Victory's church, and there, kneeling at the altar, he said to Our Lady of Victory, "See me through to ordination in good health, and I'll take you as my patron for the rest of my life."
After returning to good health, Nelson Baker completes seminary training and at age 34 is ordained a priest. His undaunted faith in the Blessed Mother sees him through 60 years of priesthood. Most people in the western New York area have heard the story of Nelson Baker, known as Father Baker and Padre of the Poor. His work with orphans, unwed mothers, and the sick and less fortunate has become legendary. Thousands of lives were impacted through his work in the collective institutions of St. Joseph's Orphanage, St. John's Protectory, and the Our Lady of Victory Maternity Hospital located in Lackawanna, New York. No one was turned away from the goodwill of Father Baker.
Father Baker was a really multifaceted person. Every need he could find, whether it was for Black Catholics, whether it was for orphans, whether it was for unwed mothers, or whatever it happened to be, he would say, "This is the work of the church. The church has to do this." And despite the opposition that he got from governments many times for trying to do that, he said, "No way. This is our work. It's our mission. It's what the church is all about."
By the age of 75, Father Baker, with the aid of the Sisters of St. Joseph and the Brothers of the Holy Infancy, has transformed Ridge Road into a community of charity. Before rebuilding the fire-damaged St. Patrick's, Father Baker makes needed repairs to St. Joseph's Orphanage, continues construction of the maternity hospital, and opens the new Our Lady of Victory parochial school, welcoming over 300 students. The turn of the century into the 1920s sees the Erie Canal bring a swell of industry and interest due to its affordable transportation of goods on the Great Lakes and nearby railways. Drawn by this advantage, the Lackawanna Iron and Steel Company from Scranton, Pennsylvania, moved its entire facilities to Limestone Hill in West Seneca, an area outside of Buffalo, New York. The company and its subsidiary, the Lackawanna Bridge Works Corporation, reorganized into the Lackawanna Steel Company, employing 6,000 workers, 2,000 of which moved from Scranton. As a result, Father Baker absorbed a large number of new parishioners into the already crowded St. Patrick's Church. The steel company demanded large investments from West Seneca, forcing the town to separate the plant and the surrounding area to form its own incorporated municipality. In 1909, the city of Lackawanna, New York was born, taking its name from the steel mill. During the next 10 years, unionization, nationwide strikes, and riots caused a violent uproar in the U.S. steel industry. Following the Union drive, the company's profits fell, and Lackawanna Steel is acquired by another Pennsylvania-based company, Bethlehem Steel. Millions were spent to update the facilities in Lackawanna, which brought in even more workers and commerce to the area.
Well, it was a great city. Lackawanna was a great city in the 20s. It was hustle and bustle, it was roaring. You had a lot of big community, different nationalities. Each nationality had their own celebrations in conjunction with the steel plant working there. A lot of businesses, probably people making money, buying homes, building homes. So it was big in the 20s.
Buffalo was sort of mixed or integrated or linked to a lot of these other major cities because we were kind of the gateway to the West. So what happens as a result of that, we get architects that are very interested in that growth. And we have had wonderful architecture here. E.B. Green, Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, etc. They were drawn by opportunities, I think, here for development.
One of Father Baker's responsibilities was to serve as Vicar General and Administrative Deputy to the Bishop of Buffalo. In 1915, Most Reverend Charles Henry Colton, 4th Bishop of Buffalo, passed away. Standing in for the late bishop, Monsignor Baker traveled to Olean, New York, to open St. Mary of the Angels Church with Pastor Father Edward Rengel. This church was designed by architect Emil Ulrich, someone who would later help manifest Father Baker's dream. At the age of 79, when most men have long gone into retirement, Father Baker takes on a massive endeavor. He never completely rebuilds the burned St. Patrick's Church. He directs the workers to only repair the areas necessary to carry on worship. At a parish meeting, Father Baker announces his plans to build a magnificent church, one that would rival similar sanctuaries in Europe, to express loyalty and devotion to his patroness, Our Lady of Victory. When Father Rengel hears that Father Baker is planning to build a shrine, he urges Emil Ulrich to contact him. In a letter dated January 16, 1921, the architect enthusiastically writes to Father Nelson Baker.
Right Reverend Monsignor, Father Edward J. Rengel of Olean, New York, requests me to get in communication with you. He writes me you are planning the building of a national shrine to Our Lady of Victory. The very thought of such a project enthuses me. I have a vivid impression of Notre-Dame des Victoires in Paris, which I frequented during my student days. Yet I would not copy this style, much less St. Mary of the Angels at Olean or any other church. I rather think of your project in a modern Renaissance form of expression. I intend to go to France this spring to bring back Mrs. Ulrich, who is at Nice. I would delight in being entrusted with your confidence in giving form to your holy project.
Well, we know that Ulrich is a graduate of the École des Beaux-Arts, which was the top of the Pops School of Architecture in France. And for a time period, it was considered the best school, architecture school in the world, certainly by Americans.
Emile Ulrich was a young Frenchman born in March 28, 1873. He was born in a very, very small town in France. He was orphaned at an early age, continued to have what appears to be a great education, goes on to work with a prominent Parisian firm, and for some reason in 1892 there was a change of fortune and he decided to come to the United States. He goes to Cincinnati and then comes up to Cleveland, and in 1899 becomes Godfrey Fugman's partner in their firm, which lasts until 1903. Emil Ulrich did quite a number of churches after he left the firm of Fugman and Ulrich.
February 5th, 1921. Father Baker responds to Emil Ulrich's letter and tells him that he plans to begin building the new church in the spring, and invites Emil to come look at the grounds where the National Shrine will be constructed.
My dear friend, received your nice letter stating Father Rangel of Olean requested you to get in communication with me, as we are planning to build a national shrine to Our Lady of Victory. I read with pleasure that you are going to Europe, and you would like to consider plans for our new church, which we hope will be very beautiful, representing the national shrine of Our Lady of Victory.
Ulrich came actually from Europe, so he was very familiar with the way churches and ecclesiastical buildings came together. So when he came to Buffalo and he met Father Baker, those two clicked. And clicked means that Father Baker had the desire, the focus, could actually come up with financing, and Ulrich had the architectural integrity, and the other thing that he must have had was an incredible work ethic.
Nelson Baker's experience as a businessman before becoming a priest and his familiarity with fundraising give birth to brilliant campaigns. One idea detailed an opportunity for contributors to purchase a $10 block of marble for the shrine. Their names would be remembered forever, written in a little book and placed under the statue of Our Lady of Victory on the main altar. Father Baker asks Emil Ulrich before he leaves for Europe to draw a sketch of Our Lady of Victory shrine to be used in a postcard campaign.
In some of the correspondence, they had not really even reached the level beyond foundation, but Father Baker wanted drawings so that they could print postcards and sell the postcards during Lent to raise money for finishing. So he's always thinking.
He found ways to ask people for funds in a way that he thought they would be able to help him, but wouldn't put a burden on people. And so he asked them to send change to help build the Basilica. The Federal Post Office recognizes Father Baker as the founder of mail order solicitation. He would send letters to people all over the country. He asked postmasters to put letters in the mailboxes of people who were Irish, had Irish last names, thinking that they would be Catholic.
Throughout construction of the shrine, Father Baker seeks the best value for his money when choosing materials. He would make payments for goods and services at a rate equal to the fundraising. For some, patience became more than a virtue. It was a necessity. In addition to running elaborate fundraising campaigns and preparing the school basement as a temporary church, Baker summons the hand of a reliable general contractor for the shrine. Edward S. Jordan, a parishioner at St. Patrick's and the principal contractor for many of Father Baker's institutions, was an obvious choice. Father Baker celebrates his last Mass at St. Patrick's Church the day before it is dismantled. He writes Emil Ulrich.
My dear friend, we are having our last services in our little church tomorrow and have advertised to pull down the old one immediately. And if we had a rough sketch of the line of the foundation, that will satisfy us for the present. Hoping we will get soon some of the working plans for the foundation. Beg to remain. Very respectfully yours, Father Nelson Baker.
Father Baker and Jordan are anxious to get the project underway. However, Ulrich reminds them that the land must be surveyed, as usual, and that the court records must be found. In August of 1921, after the annual novena for the Feast of the Assumption, Bishop William Turner, 6th Bishop of Buffalo, lays and blesses the cornerstone.
Cornerstone's a fun tradition, and the church has really maintained that. Symbolically, as Christians, we know that Christ is the cornerstone. There's a wonderful ceremony with the bishop who blesses the ground, blesses the stone, And so it's a chance to really, with a liturgy or with a ritual, begin the construction.
Father Baker, having a good history with his general contractor, Edward Jordan, feels confident in surging forward with the construction of the shrine. Ulrich decides to remain in Cleveland to work on the plans, which are behind schedule. He is confident that Jordan can oversee matters at the worksite. Ulrich explains.
We have already started work. I have completely worked out details, and we are still knee-deep in them.
The Basilica was sort of built in an odd manner. It was not totally designed before they started building it, so it was kind of like a work-as-you-go type of thing.
Bids for the materials and handiwork come in from many regions. Ideas for granite, marble, and terracotta are open to discussion, comparing prices to durability. Although being the most expensive, marble is ultimately decided to be the material of choice for the exterior of the shrine. The basement floor is to consist of steel-reinforced concrete, covered with granite, to form the foundation.
The granite foundation is the best, because the granite is really the most impervious natural material to water and snow and so on, and it can take a beating.
As 1921 comes to a close, Father Baker anxiously awaits the plans for the steel and marble work so they can be sent out to bidders. Ulrich remarks that the drawings are taking longer than expected. Shortly, he sends Baker temporary plans for the steelwork. After Emil sends many letters comparing different marble companies, Father Baker announces that he has hired the Georgia Marble Company for the exterior marble. Located in Tate, Georgia, the Georgia Marble Company's mines were known for some of the best quality marble found in the United States. Originally founded in the 1830s by Irishman Henry Fitzsimmons and then later reformed by Samuel Tate, the company supplied the marble for notable landmarks, such as the New York Stock Exchange Annex and the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. At about the same time of hiring the Georgia Marble Company, the Lackawanna Bridge Works Corporation is hired to supply most of the steel for the shrine. Ulrich is unaware of all the details in the contracts the eager Father Baker is signing, and the changes to the temporary steel plans that Emil sent are challenged by the steel company. The company's assistant manager, Mr. Hazard, writes to Father Baker.
Mr. Ulrich, the architect for the shrine, has seen fit to make additions to the material covered by our contract, and he is still likely to make further additions.
In the letter, Mr. Hazard also asks for Father Baker's approval on the added cost. Father Baker writes Ulrich and sternly states,
Now, Mr. Ulrich, we feel you ought to have made these plans specific, and we feel you had time enough to make the plans perfect when you could have foreseen this necessity. If you continue to make changes, we do not know where this will end.
There was tension and disagreement, and I want to say as an architect that never happens. Happens all the time. It's normal. And because you've got two smart people, you've got two strong people. And that's just normal.
Ulrich responds to the letters, expressing his dismay about Father Baker is signing contracts before the steel plans are finalized. In his letter to the steel company, he writes,
Gentlemen, I am in receipt of a letter written by your Monsieur Hazard to Monsignor Baker, complaining that I saw fit to make additions to your contract. I may make additions indefinitely. You are trying to stampede a very busy man to sign blindly on the dotted line. This is my first experience of a contractor rushing to an owner over the head of an architect with a blanket claim.
Ulrich then writes to Monsignor Baker,
Right Reverend Monsignor, I greatly rejoiced at your preceding letter where you announced the letting of the marble contract. Georgia Marble will be the very best selection that could have been made. I was not so pleased with your last letter, telling about Monsieur Hazard's letter to you. For your information, I enclose my comment to him. He rushed you for his signature in a very unfair manner.
Correspondence between Father Baker and Emil Ulrich is just fascinating. They seem to get along very well, yet they have their moments where they butt heads and flowery sentences are written back and forth to sort of get their points across.
This is my first experience where contracts were let before all details were completed, and where I remained out of touch with what these contracts contained. I am convinced that only in your able hands, Monseigneur, could such a thing be attempted.
That's a natural tension where the builder's trying to get the building done, and they have to make a decision, and they just go ahead or start doing things without coordinating with the architect.
Both men really respected each other, and I do believe that Father Baker believed in Ulrich's vision for his church. They were of a like mind there. It was just matters of, could you hurry up with these drawings, or, does that have to cost so much?
The desire to save money plays a major role in the layout of the exterior of the shrine.
What I think is interesting for people to realize, and I as an architect have total respect for it, is that the exterior, especially on the back and the one side, is very simple. So this is a very expensive building, and we have a lot of carved detail, hand-carved detail, and this all takes time and costs money. And so where do you stop? Do you stop anywhere? If you look at the back versus the front, there's a clear hierarchy, and they're putting their money on the front. And I agree with that. I think that was the right thing to do.
The shrine can be described as a building within a building. The steel frame and the marble exterior are both freestanding, independent of each other. When the marble expands and contracts due to changes in climate, the interior steel will not shift. This allows steel and marble work to be constructed at the same time.
As the steel is going up, or when it's up, we're going to begin the walls. And the walls are going to be, in a sense, mainly their own structure. And they're going to be made out of the marble, but also brick. So they're fairly thick walls, and they support themselves in most places.
Difficulty arises during the construction in 1922. Ulrich informs the newly organized Bethlehem Steel Plant of his concerns with their unsafe work methods in construction of the 75-foot wide dome. The laborers at the job site neglected to install the compression unit, which stabilizes the curved beams at the top of the dome, causing damage to the roof and surrounding work area.
I have to state to you our dissatisfaction with your manner of erecting the steelwork at the shrine in Lackawanna. It is hard to understand how this open shell was to resist compression with the compression member left out and cause the dome to spring open like a nutcracker. It should be taken down at once and completed at the shop before being put back in place. We must protest against the reckless handling of this erecting, which has already resulted in much damage, to beams bent, masonry shaken up, and the entire structure necessarily being thrown out of alignment.
It's a steel frame surrounding the dome, and then lots of truss work to hold up that dome. So the dome's very heavy, and it's got a lot of wants to thrust out, wants to push out.
Ultimately, the steel dome was rebuilt, and Ulrich entertains the idea of having the dome exterior itself covered in marble tiles. The Georgia Marble Company mentions the idea would not be suitable for the climate of western New York. Ulrich still pushes this idea for some time, but Father Baker ultimately decides that marble tile on the dome is impractical, expensive, and too risky. Baker insists.
The outside of the dome will be copper.
Ulrich concedes. In 1923, Monsignor Baker received special recognition from Rome, commending his religious leadership by naming him Prothonotary Apostolic ad Instar Participantium, which distinguishes Father Baker as a Vatican notary in the United States. This is an honor accorded to only 5 other clergymen in the U.S. at this time. As the work continues during the winter months, bids from contractors pour in. The McWorth Brothers Company from Oak Street in Buffalo is awarded the contract for the copper roof and the 4 copper angels that are to adorn the north, south, east, and west points of the outside dome. The Benzinger Marble Company, with offices in New York and Italy, is awarded the contract for 15 near-life-size statues for the Stations of the Cross and statues of Our Lady of Victory, one in the front niche of the shrine and another on the altar. Ulrich pays a visit to the job site in February to work out the details of heating and cooling in the shrine. He receives help from the John W. Danforth Company from Buffalo in the drafting of these plans. He promises Danforth in writing that he may match the lowest bid for the job when it comes in. Baker feels this special arrangement is unjust to the other bidders. Ulrich defends his actions, insisting he had no other engineer to work with. He feels that Danforth must be either hired or compensated for his assistance. This time Baker concedes. The design for the heating and cooling system is practical and cost-effective.
We're in the air conditioning room, and this is where large blocks of ice were put on this table below me. The fan in back of me would draw air from the outside over the ice, send it up through the ductwork, through the church floor, where there are grates, and cool the air in throughout the church.
November 23, 1923. Ulrich writes Baker and tells him he will be in Buffalo soon, and he has already sent prints to Anderle for the stained glass window details. Otto F. Anderle was commissioned to create the stained glass for the shrine. Garipo Raggi, a well-established artist in the United States, is commissioned to create murals and paintings for the shrine. The Italian-born professor teams up with Buffalo artist Marian Rzeźnik, a Polish native, to design all the interior paintings.
What you have is a series of artists and architects collaborating and making decisions. So we give Ulrich, he's the director of the symphony, but the different musicians are actually making a lot of decisions. He's working with Father Baker, who's clearly a strong leader and had his own views about things.
As 1923 comes to a close, Ulrich tells Father Baker that he will take a steamship to Italy to see how the marble and sculpting details are progressing.
Building a basilica will continue in a moment. And now back to building a basilica.
February 1924. Ulrich is at the Tonetti Brothers Marble Company to negotiate prices for the interior marble. This company has access to exclusive mines containing the most beautiful Italian marble available on Earth. The quote is $130,000 for all the interior marble. Ulrich writes Baker that this is 1/3 of what they would pay in the States. Emil boasts.
A bargain. They promised to astonish me and would also sacrifice their profit to execute this beautiful work as an advertisement. And they will spare no money or efforts to make your shrine the most beautiful in America.
Also in Father Baker's favor is the currency exchange. The Italian lira has dropped in value from 20 cents to 4 1/3 American cents. Emil states,
It would be best to stipulate in the contract what the value of today's lira is.
Ulrich states the Tonetti firm has just acquired 4 blocks of Rouge Royale marble, the same rare red marble to be used in the twisted columns for the shrine. The history of this rare red marble was revealed in a story written by Josephine Pilkington. After World War I, 2 American soldiers traveling through Spain stopped at a remote farmhouse for water and were surprised to find the owner's parlor adorned with pictures of Our Lady of Victory and Nelson Baker. The soldiers spoke of Father Baker building a shrine to honor Our Lady of Victory in America. The farmer insisted the marble on his property be donated to honor Father Baker's dream. Baker notifies Ulrich that $130,000 is deposited in the Marine Trust for the Tonetti Brothers Marble Company. Emil sends an urgent telegram to Baker asking him to convert American dollars to lira as to avoid mutual risk. The Tonetti brothers are getting very nervous as they experience difficulty withdrawing money from the trust since it is in American dollars and not Italian lira. The value of the lira has changed, causing them to lose money on the deal. As a result, their enthusiasm in the project begins to drop. Baker writes the trust and begins the long, difficult process of settling the currency issue. By this time, Ulrich realizes that his work with Father Baker is almost complete. He respectfully and humbly reminds Father Baker of his need to be compensated.
I will have to wake up to the fact that I must earn a living. So far, I have acted like a fancier with no worries of the future. I was blinded by the fun of doing something beautiful. I dropped into oblivion, and that can be done in a few weeks, and I fear nullify a lifetime of upbuilding. My little economies are going fast, and I will have to get another job. I trust to Providence, and to your goodwill and sense of fairness.
Father Baker responds and states that everything is looking so beautiful. He also mentions,
I am enclosing a few dollars, as you may need it.
In the months ahead, Baker continues to send Ulrich payments for his services. As the year 1924 ends, the exterior facade is complete. The interior work, including the stained glass paintings and statuary, are well underway. Father Baker writes the lawyer for the Tonetti brothers, stating he's awaiting some major pieces for the altars and pleads that the company be careful when boxing items, as some of the marble columns are broken in two when they arrive in America. In a few months, Monsignor Baker announces that Bishop Turner has agreed to celebrate the dedication of the shrine on October 7th, the Feast of Our Lady of Victory. This date is later changed due to marble from abroad not arriving on time. By December of 1925, the official dedication date is not yet announced, but enough of the shrine is completed to allow Father Baker to celebrate the first Mass there on Christmas Day. Writing about this opening event in the Annals, Father Baker notes, "The spirit of Our Lady permeates the entire edifice."
Our Lady of Victory is the gem. It's the culmination of decades of building and designing and planning. It's at the top. And I think that would be at the top of Father Baker's list as well. And I can't think of an architect that wouldn't be proud that they had built that structure. I think that's definitely the culmination of their work.
There are still some details that must be completed before the shrine can be officially dedicated. Main altarpieces and columns which were shipped are still in New York City, and Father Baker learns that they are being held there until Tonetti is paid in full. Baker insists Tonetti adheres to the contract as written, despite the changing value of the lira.
I am very much ashamed and more or less indignant that you are treating us like so many children in acting perfectly regardless of our signed contracts.
Father Baker is anxious to pay all debts, and he asks Ulrich, who is now in Havana with his wife, to try to settle all accounts. Emil writes to Baker that he will take up the matter of the missing pieces of the shrine with the lawyer for the Tonetti brothers. One unexpected favor occurs at this time. President Calvin Coolidge and the United States Congress grant Father Baker the right to have the marble for the shrine coming from abroad to be admitted duty-free to the United States. The near completion of the shrine allows Monsignor Baker to again set the date of the official dedication. It is to be held on March 19th, 1926, the 50th anniversary of Father Baker's ordination to the priesthood. Unfortunately, Father Baker takes ill, and the official dedication is again postponed. The dedication of the Our Lady of Victory Shrine commences on May 25th, 1926. The consecration ceremony begins at 6 a.m. with Bishop William Turner, 6th Bishop of Buffalo, officiating. Father Baker serves as celebrant of the dedication Mass, held at 10:30 a.m. 400 bishops and priests from all over the country attend the event. Over 30,000 people try to squeeze into the shrine that can hold 5,000. The crowd gasps as they delight in the realized beauty of Father Baker's dream. Cardinal Patrick Hayes of New York states in his sermon that day,
"I know of no church like this, so beautiful, so uplifting, so glorious. I know of no other church like this, consecrated to the charities of Christ our Lord. It is a monument to the Buffalo Diocese, the city of Lackawanna, to our great Lady of Victory, and to a modern apostle of charity, Father Baker."
Father Baker himself is very pleased with how well the shrine turned out.
its brilliant white marble exterior glistening in the sunlight, while the tall, stately cross-crowned spires pierce high into the clouds, and its magnificent dome, a scene unequaled in splendor, seldom if ever witnessed.
The classical impulse, which Ulrich exemplifies by this kind of Roman sensibility, is very clear on the outside with the Tuscan columns, the smaller columns. The overall composition from the exterior, these amazing arms, these curvilinear arms that come out and embrace you, and how there's a crescendo up to the towers and then back to the dome. So it really is an amazing body, like a head and arms and legs. It's all been put together.
The artistic style is very Baroque. If you look at the curved frontage, that is different from St. Peter's. It's Baroque because it's curved and it is like a pulling you in to the front of the building. I think that the style is incredible.
What's interesting is the French, like they always do, they learn from Rome, they learn from the Italians, and then they bring their own abilities to it. And often they make it more pure, maybe even more elegant. And so he's looking at Rome through the French lens and creating something spectacular.
Above the ends of the exterior colonnades are two very beautiful marble sculptures. On the left, 30 young girls surround a sister of St. Joseph. Above her, an immense angel with the torch of faith in one hand and in the other a wreath of honor. On the right, 30 young boys surrounding Father Baker, with another large angel hovering overhead. The sculpture was made in secret. The humble Father Baker was surprised and quite upset to discover it, and demanded to have it removed. After much convincing, he agrees to let it stay. At the main entrance stands a statue of Our Lady of Victory with her divine child, standing 12 feet high and weighing 16,000 pounds, carved from white Carrara marble. Passing through the massive bronze doors, many are astonished by the sheer beauty of the interior.
If you stand here and face the back door when people come in, or you're with them when they come in, the very first thing you see is their jaw drop as they walk down the aisle. You can almost see them saying, "Oh my gosh, this is really just unbelievable. It's hard to even take it all in." I've seen that expression on people's faces over and over again.
One can almost imagine Father Baker himself proudly leading tours through his shrine.
Walking down the center aisle to the main altar, you notice the beautifully carved Stations of the Cross on either side of the shrine, each of these carved from their own block of pure white Carrara marble. Looking up, you will take in the 8 painted panels representing the Laurentania Litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary. At the top of the nave, the inspiring stained glass windows depicting the 7 joyful episodes in the life of Our Blessed Lady, and the 7 sorrowful episodes in the life of Our Blessed Lady. There are 134 windows in the shrine, the 2 largest being 13 feet in diameter. The 2 large rose windows in the transepts are marvels of beauty. Another beautiful feature of the shrine is the Lady of Lourdes Grotto. This chapel depicts the visitation of Mary to St. Bernadette in Lourdes, France, and is hewn out of black lava rock from Mount Vesuvius in Italy.
The Catholic Church is a church of sacramentality. Okay? It means that we see in created reality and material reality the divine shining through. Beauty always does that. Father Baker was so concerned about making sure he had the most beautiful, the best materials, the best artists. He knew that what they could do with their crafts and with their arts would speak to people for generations.
One of the most stunning creations in the shrine is the painting of the main dome. The artist, Professor Raggi, describes it here.
Glancing upwards at the dome, a veritable sea of celestial beauty greets the eye. In a painting representing a vision of heaven and the Assumption of the Blessed Mother of God, carried in the arms of an angelic host of heavenly beings, prostrating themselves before the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, who are placing the crown of celestial magnificence upon the brow of the Immaculate Mother of Christ.
Many people come here and they'll tell you that they come here because it's a place that they find the most peace in their life that they don't find elsewhere.
You're drawn into, I think, the inner spirit. I used to call it the void, which was the space where has potential for all good things to happen. The architecture of the void. Well, the churches aren't probably constructed to be the void, but they are that. And they do bring in that sense of repose and serenity.
The main focus of the Our Lady of Victory Shrine is the powerful expression of the main altar.
Wandering down the center aisle, we come to the extreme end to drink in the beauty of the main altar. The 4 beautifully twisted columns on the main altar are of rare red Pyrenees marble, which holds the magnificent dome, with angelic figures hovering over it, all surrounding Our Lady of Victory, which stands 9 feet in height. 14 beautiful angelic figures add to the magnificence of the altar. Over the tabernacle stand 2 other angels holding the marble pillow upon which is to rest the ostensorium containing the most blessed sacrament, which is surrounded by a large and elegant golden crown.
When you walk in the main entrance, it's magnetic. There is a kind of visual, artistic pull to the center, which is Our Lady.
I think the main altar is very gutsy, and it just is like a crescendo. And you see it as you enter, but as you get closer to it, you realize how wonderful it is. And the further you get in, the mystery kind of unfolds. The other thing that I really love are the 2 chapels off the transept. I think those are knockouts that are their own little space, and they're kind of domical. They're like little mini churches, like the main sanctuary.
The side altars are most magnificent in painting, color, and sculptures. On the east side, the altar dedicated to the Sacred Heart of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The statue is much larger than life, standing on an altar of vari-colored marble. On the west side is the altar of St. Joseph, where a larger-than-life statue of Joseph holds the Christ child in his right hand and a beautifully carved lily in his left.
Professor Raji describes the murals.
Over St. Joseph's altar are the paintings depicting the slaughter of the innocents, showing how determined King Herod was to destroy the life of the divine child, issuing an order for the destruction of all the male children under 2 years of age. The flight into Egypt depicts the event of an angel of God to notify Saint Joseph to take the child and the mother and flee into Egypt. Over the altar of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is the nativity of our blessed Lord, showing the manger scene at the birth of our Lord and the coming of the wise men to adore the newborn Savior.
Behind the main altar, a curved walkway displays 5 more altars honoring various saints.
So what that allows you to do in the back of the altar in the rotunda type area is to go around and continue your journey. What it does is it graciously rounds off your experience and see what's behind as well as what's in front of.
The first of the back altars recalls the patron saint of the original church, which once stood here. St. Patrick's altar bestows the figure of Ireland, with a white robe and blue mantle, sitting on the venerable stone of destiny, the ancient symbol of national independence and governmental authority. It is by a green, white, and orange flag of the reawakened nation, and above that, the Celtic cross, to symbolize the Catholicism of the nation. Following along, we visit the altar of St. Aloysius, the altar of the Immaculate Mother, the altar of St. Anne, and the last altar is that of St. Vincent de Paul, which depicts this great patron of charity, holding a newborn babe, and with his other arm about the neck of a homeless boy.
It is believed that there are over 2,000 angels in the shrine, either in sculpture or painting.
We believe that angels surround us, and especially surround us in the liturgy, so it's very appropriate that we try to show them in our buildings, or on our buildings, in the case of Our Lady of Victory. But 2,000 is amazing.
The open spaces where you would anticipate a column as a pendant form, and in between these arches are angels with long wings, and he loves angels. You will find angels in all of his churches. And Father Baker, again, is another fan of the angel.
2 months after the shrine is dedicated, on July 28, 1926, the Vatican designated Our Lady of Victory Shrine as a minor basilica by papal decree. It is the second minor basilica in the United States. The title of basilica bestows a church with certain privileges that are conferred on it by the Pope. Our Lady of Victory Basilica contains a papal throne and umbrella that will be opened only in the event that the Pope should visit. The Vatican decree notes,
"It is not its beauty, size, or magnificence that gives the sanctuary of Our Lady of Victory of Lackawanna its greatest importance. Its greatest value is that it is in the center of a very large work of piety and charity."
This last statement giving credit to the institutions that Father Baker served during his priesthood. Into the 1930s, during the Great Depression, Father Baker and his institutions continued to help those in need. On April 30th, 1936, Father Baker is admitted to Our Lady of Victory Hospital, suffering from pneumonia. He recovers from this ordeal, but was never again in good health, and is readmitted in July. Nelson Baker died the morning of July 29, 1936, at age 95, with no money in the bank, indebted to no one, and no one indebted to me, as stated in his last will and testament.
One of the greatest outpourings of all time was Father Baker's funeral.
Thousands and thousands of people lining Ridge Road.
Really a beloved man by people across the country, across the state, and those of other faiths recognized that this was a great American who had done great works for us.
On August 3rd, a reported 500,000 mourners processed down Ridge Road for Father Baker's funeral. As they walk, the panoramic view of this man's many achievements through his faith in God and his never-failing trust in Our Lady of Victory is displayed. The many institutions he served, the boys' home he managed, the hospital he cared for, the school he led, and the shrine he built would certainly all nod in agreement to give honor to this saintly man of charity, a man who gave the credit for all his achievements to Our Lady of Victory. To this day, Father Baker's institutions continue to help the less fortunate.
He was able to set into place, whether he knew it or not, a program to care for the poor that was going to last 100 years after him, 200 years after him, maybe 300 or 400 years, yeah.
The Our Lady of Victory Basilica, however, has undergone some physical changes over the years.
When Father Baker asked Ulrich to give him a sketch of what the church would be like, the basilica would be like, Ulrich gave him a chalk drawing, and if you took that drawing, you held it up to the outside of the facade of the basilica today, it's almost identical. The difference being that the towers on the outside of the church were about 30 feet taller than they are at the present time. In the 40s, they were destabilized by an electrical storm, and the towers had to be taken down to a certain level, and then they capped them off with a copper cap that matched the dome.
This is a church to be seen from afar, from even miles away. And if you could bring back those towers, 164 feet, it would be incredible and would fulfill Baker and Ulrich's vision, which is what they intended.
The maintenance of Our Lady of Victory Basilica requires constant attention. Much renovation was done in the 1980s and again in 2012, as all the windows were taken out above the main altar, re-leaded, and carefully reinstalled. Some painting and plastering had to be done as well. The basilica cost nearly $4 million to build in 1926. Today, there is doubt that such a structure could be built.
I've asked that question of architects, how difficult would it be to rebuild this building? And they kind of scratch their head and roll their eyes and walk away.
Yeah, $4 million in 1926. And it's funny because I have clients who want me to build buildings for them for $4 million. They're not Father Baker, though.
The cost of it would be prohibitive. Finding the craftsmen to do it the way it was done here with the quality of work, almost an impossibility these days. And of course, financing it.
I think it's a couple $100 million. I think it's $200 million. And a lot of that money is frankly it's in the handwork.
This is not the kind of a church that you build in a parish. It's a once in a lifetime, once in a location kind of a building.
These older buildings, these historic buildings that we have, they embody the history of their time. And the materials can never be recreated. There's a term for it, embedded worth, I believe is what it is.
Our modern churches don't have anything close to this. It takes people to do it. It takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money, but it's what we love about it. It's very human. It's very connected to our bodies and to our sight.
There's a lot of human energy that you can almost feel when you enter the Basilica, and you should be able to feel it. It's a lot. But more so than that, after you experience that, that's when the serenity begins.
The Basilica has some 30,000 visitors each year. People come to enjoy its beauty and to pray at the tomb of Father Baker. In 1999, Father Baker's remains were exhumed from the nearby Holy Cross Cemetery and entombed inside the Basilica in the grotto of Our Lady of Lourdes. People pray for healings, miracles, and favors, but also pray for Father Baker's canonization to sainthood.
The cause for Father Baker's canonization goes back to 1988, when Bishop Head proposed to Rome the possibility of Father Baker's canonization. Rome accepted the case, and that time on, Father Baker was called Servant of God. Father Baker's body was brought back into the Basilica in 1999. Rome suggested that because they wanted people to have more access to Father Baker's physical presence and also pray for his canonization. Monsignor Wirtz, who was my predecessor, began to put together documentation on a miracle that would potentially lead Father Baker to beatification. That was finished and presented to Rome. Along with that, about 800 pages of documentation on Father Baker's life.
In 2011, Pope Benedict XVI approved the document on Nelson Baker's heroic virtue and declared Father Baker venerable.
His cause for canonization, very exciting that could give renewed life to the Basilica, bring people there for a number of reasons, including to pay their respects to this great saintly man who built all of this wonderful work, and perhaps his greatest work, at least architecturally, his greatest work was the Basilica. I suppose his greatest work was the lives of the boys and girls. And it's across generations, and especially the young people. I find that young people, given the choice, love the richness. They may not know much about it, they may not have grown up with it, but once they are come in contact with it, they find it very compelling.
The question arises, how was the Basilica built in 5 years? The answer, simultaneously, in all corners of the world, by a various number of architectural, artistic, and creative contributors, and brought together here in Lackawanna, New York.
They were really very, very fortunate in talent of the other workers that did work the inside, the sculptors, the painters, the frescoers, everyone. All the metal work on the outside, the angels, and just amazing. It's quite miraculous. I think they got it done in 5 years.
My experience has been is that all great churches, you give credit to the talented architect and the talented patron. And sometimes the patron may be very tough on the architect. One thinks of Pope Julius II and Michelangelo on the Sistine ceiling. Sometimes that tough client or patron will bring it out of the artist. But there's no question that the great buildings were all done by an architect who was very involved and very talented, but the client was also involved. And that's what you see with Father Baker.
To me, as an architect, the value of the Basilica is seemingly in terms of its design and its architectural beauty. But I think as a philosopher, what I really admire about the Basilica is its ability to get us to our spiritual side, our deeper side, our more sublime side. And I think that the Basilica accomplishes both of those.
Can architecture assist us in our work? Can it assist us in our prayer? Can it assist us in faith? Can it even, in a sense, evangelize? And I would say that in the case of Our Lady of Victory, the answer is yes.
People come here, and I think part of that awe is the fact that they not only see beauty, but in it they see God and they find God in their life. So that part of Father Baker's vision has certainly been consistent, and it's held up down through the ages.
It seems to me that whether you're a Catholic or not, this is a great work of art. I like to think of a building, and in this case I would say Father Baker's shrine, Our Lady of Victory, is a great sermon that he wrote. It's a great sermon that lives on after his death and continues to speak to people today.